there is a red line. The goal, as dissident Xu Zhiyong puts it in his powerful book, To Build a Free China, A Citizen's Journey, is, quote, a free China with democracy and rule of law, a just and prosperous civil society, and a new national spirit of freedom, justice, and love. If we can help the peoples of China and Hong Kong, Tibet, and East Turkestan achieve that, the world will be a better, more peaceful, and safer place. And that, I think, is the spirit of the Tibetan people.
Hello.
Welcome to Toronto team, Senator and fellows, special event. Welcome to Toronto. Under the United Nations, Article 18, religious freedom. Article 19, freedom of expression. Article 20, freedom of peaceful assembly. So under Article 18, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religious beliefs. So religious persecution on Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and Falun Gong effort. Why United Nations cannot do anything about it? What is the reason behind it? How can we make it happen? Thank you.
Very quickly, I'll start to answer that question. There's an article that I published about 3 years ago, specifically on all of the treaties that China has signed on to at the United Nations, vowing their support for religious freedom, for freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. The Chinese Communist Party has never, ever actually followed through on any of their commitments to peoples around the world. That is the Chinese regime. And I'll let Ben talk a little bit further on that.
Thank you very much. It's a great question. I think the first thing to say is that, building on what Dean's just said, the Chinese Communist Party regime can never be trusted to keep its word. We've seen in the case of Hong Kong, for example, that it has totally broken a treaty that it made with the United Kingdom, in which it made many promises to uphold Hong Kong's freedoms and autonomy, and it's totally destroyed that. In its own constitution, not just in the United Nations treaties, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that you've mentioned, but in China's own constitution, religious freedom, for example, is promised, but it's totally denied in practice. To answer your question directly, I think the reason the UN has not been able to do more is that China has very successfully infiltrated the UN. I say infiltrated, of course it's a member state, so it has legitimacy in the sense of being able to be at the UN, but it's infiltrated in terms of really gaining key positions, and it's done so by pouring in huge amounts of money. And for example, I've been asking for some years why the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has said nothing about the genocide of the Uyghurs. He said nothing about the dismantling of freedoms in Hong Kong, and he certainly said nothing about Tibet. But you don't have to look very far. Dean's phrase is follow the money, and it's exactly right. China has poured in millions of dollars, 20 million a year to be precise, into the office of the Secretary General at the United Nations, into a fund that is only controlled by the Secretary General and the Chinese government together, with no transparency, no accountability. A former US ambassador to the UN Economic and Social Council, Ambassador Kelly Curry, agreed to be interviewed for my book, and I quote her with her permission extensively on this very matter, and she describes it as a Chinese slush fund that has bought influence within the UN. The other factor, of course, is that China's economic investment and the Belt and Road Initiative and places like the Solomon Islands and so many other places have been effectively bought by China and therefore are silent at the UN. So when there are resolutions, there are many countries that you would have thought would vote for resolutions on human rights, but they don't because they're worried about the repercussions and the consequences for them for China if they do so. Having said that, it was interesting last year there was a resolution on the Uyghurs, which was only defeated by a couple of votes. So that gives us a little bit of cause for hope in that more countries were willing to step up than perhaps would have been the case a few years ago. And I think things are starting slowly to change, and we need more people like our friends from the Solomon Islands in countries to speak up and wake up and change that dominance of China at the UN. But that's the reason currently that the UN is so weak and so unable to do what it should.
Local for UN, United Nations office. So UNO. We have proposed our resolution supported by El Salvador at the beginning of 1963 resolution, and right now United Nations organization is run by Chinese money. You know that recently you have seen WHO, WTO, all this, all run by Chinese money. So we have no hope. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming here. I want like Chinese influence operation have been starting. They started in early 80s when Deng Xiaoping ruled the country. Their propaganda narrative was peaceful rights of China for reform and democracy. That misguided hope was really influenced into international community, especially United States of America. So Deng Xiaoping, deep down, they had that COVID interest of hiding the capabilities and biding time. So for last 20, 30 years, during this time, they were doing the this influence operation for so many years. Now China has become one of the most powerful countries in the world. So these COVID agents run by Ministry of Security and State and United Front Department. So at last, the international community has realized China was not keeping its word as he said. They were lies. China lies all the time. So my question to you is, as a Tibetan, what are our challenges and what should we do not influenced by these COVID agents or influences? You have seen that recently in Canada. One of them is the Chinese had to be sent back. You know that the COVID operations, influence operations are all over in high places. So we as Tibetans, what should we do to challenge their influence operations or COVID influences? Thank you very much.
Let me just start on that. One of the a number of other books that Optum has published, as well as Willful Blindness by Sam Cooper. He's the journalist and was really put a focus on the influence, espionage operations, transnational organized crime, and working with the MSS and the United Front Works Department. I have published also Hidden Hand by Clive Hamilton and Rick Wilbur, and bringing out a very, very important book that will expose the United Front here across the country, called The Mosaic Effect. I have already brought out a significant piece in Washington, D.C. on the influence operations by a U.S.-led operation to follow Canadian politicians, Canadian business people who have worked hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party for over 40 years, and with criminal elements. Those criminal elements, which is the Chinese Communist Party, is an organization that needs to be stood up to, and to be spoken about, and to be brought into the light. You here today are speaking by being here and listening, but it must be up to you to demand of your MPs, of your MNAs, of your local politicians to stand for your voice. You should have no fear. There are people like me and others that want your voices heard. And it is only through our advocacy, our political work, our grassroots, that we can push back against this evil regime. But it's all up to you. I'm here to help get those messages out, but it's all up to us to work together with the Solomon Islands, with the Uyghur community, with the Falun Gong, with the Hong Kongers. We are united for humanity against this tyrannical regime, and your voices are being heard. We need to tell David Johnson that the diaspora community, the Tibetan community, will not be silenced. Will not be silenced by the Chinese Communist regime. So those are my quick words.
I would just, I 100% agree with Dean, and I capture this thought in a simple phrase. We need to build a united front to counter the CCP's so-called united front. So we all need to unite, and this is happening more and more. A few years ago, you would not often see Tibetans, Hong Kongers, Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, Taiwanese, Chinese dissidents coming together. But in the last few years, we're seeing it happen more and more, certainly in the UK, I believe here in Canada and elsewhere. So coming together and standing, because if we stand together, we're a much bigger and stronger voice and community than if we try to do it alone. And I would encourage you to speak up where you can. Those of you that can speak up publicly, I would encourage you to do so. I understand that for some of you and for some of the other diaspora communities, you may have family back home, you may have other concerns that make it difficult to speak up publicly. But if that's the case, you can still speak privately to your elected representatives, to the police, to the local authorities. If you see examples of covert operations, of intimidation and infiltration, reporting that information to the right people is really important. So all of us can do something, whether it's public or private, and we should never allow, and it's easy for me to say this, I live in a free country, and I can't go to China and Hong Kong anyway, so in a sense I have nothing to lose. For those of you who have relatives and family back home, it's harder, but all of us can do something, and I would encourage you not to give in to the CCP's attempt to make you afraid, because that's what they want. They want us all to be fearful, and we mustn't allow them to do so.
And finally, I would like to thank Senator and his friends who have come here and shared their inspirational stories and this work that they have done over the last many years, and the stories that they have included in the book about not only the struggles that the Tibetans have gone through, but the people all over the world have struggled under the Chinese regime. On behalf of all the people here, I would like to sincerely thank everyone for your work that you have been doing, and we hope that we'll continue to keep in touch and share our thoughts and make sure that we are all working towards the same goal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I just want to say loud and clear, we have lost our country. Our elders have gone through scores of times. They really struggled, their resilience was incredible. We admire their resilience. And We have lost our country, but we have not lost our soul and spirit. Spirit of the Chinese people, our soul is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. You'll take two? Okay, one, two. $2. Two. Yes. I need two, right? Two? Yep, take two. Check, make sure they're signed, okay? You should be, but you can get them to sign them. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that.
So LH. LHA. KPA. OD. Thank you very much.
Sonam Toronto. That's my channel name.
Okay, Sonam
And Toronto.
Toronto. Like the city, like where we are. Okay. Right.
And then I like to have, I want to write in the description that it's online that the thing that going to sell anything. I need that right in my description on my channel. So can you write it
Yes. In terms of what, like.
online if people want to buy online?
Okay. Okay.
They need it.
Okay. So probably one place is Amazon.
Okay, Amazon. Okay, that's
Yeah. That's probably the common the best one.
That's the best.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
No problem. That's my Tsering.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.